Okay, I'm going to explain the thought process between the CSS battle for the 24th of Feb 2026. So this one basically just uses one element, the body, and a box shadow for everything. Pretty succinct. Let's go through step by step how I would do this. So start off with a normal style tag. Can already kind of see we've got a bunch of repeating elements of the same size and shape. Often a way to do this is with box shadow, because you just need one shape that's that size, and then you just basically repeat it with a box shadow. But I would start off with this, doing a background on the body. On the HTML element. It looks like we just need one element for this, so I'm going to start out doing it on the body. On the HTML. Do an outline so we can see what we're doing. Some margin for positioning, and then obviously we need to give it a border radius. We don't want to do percent because that'll make it an ellipse. So what we do is rather give it like a really high value. You could do like pixels, but we want this to be as short as possible. So use a unit that's got a big value like inches or centimeters. As long as it's larger, then I think it's the width or height of the element, then it'll be like pill shaped like that, like fully rounded. So that's kind of the shape that we want, although not the size. The next thing is basically to position this thing in such a way that we can create box shadows with it. So the first thing I'll do is kind of want to move it over to where that first block is on the top left, that first shape. So we'll need to change margin. So top, right, bottom, left. Okay, I'm going to put on the diff so we can see this a bit better. Increase right. Maybe like that. 280. Bottom needs to come up a bit more, and then left. Okay, that's kind of the shape that we want. And from there, we can do a box shadow. So, say, make the first one on the x-axis 50 pixels, same place on the y-axis, and then we'd want it to be that color. Okay, so that kind of gets us, yeah, there's our first shape, basically. Issue is now, obviously, like where this is just a box shadow, the actual position of the HTML element isn't showing anything if we take away the outline. So like one way to do this would be to do an inset box shadow, and you could just do something like that. That would fix it. But generally with Code Golf you want to avoid inset because it's a lot of extra characters that you're adding. A good way around that is to rather position the element off to the side. So instead of having this HTML element right there, we're going to position it further over to the left. So let's just change this to see what the smallest value is that we'd need to make it not overlap. So obviously that would overlap. We'd need to make it 60 at least for it to not overlap. So from there, then we can kind of change. We want to shift it over to the left. So we're going to increase the value of the right margin, probably about like 60-ish, and then yeah, that looks right, except not quite so much on the right. Yeah, that's the shape what we want. So now we've got the same thing, but without using inset. This is a much better way, like a shorter way to do it. And then we just continue making those shapes. So that next one we want it to be, 170. And then we can keep going until we've got all the rest. But before we carry on with that, I'm going to do, instead of repeating the color here for each box shadow, we just set the color on the actual element, and then that color will be used throughout for the box shadows. So just carrying doing this, do another box shadow, 280 is good. Okay, and then we want one directly below, so that's 0 on the x-axis and it will be some on the x-axis because it's a little bit off, our element's off to the left. So we want the same 60 pixels on x and then 110 on the y. Okay, and then for that last one, we also want it to be, so we want that to be 170 pixels on the x and 60 pixels on the y. Is that right? 110 pixels on the y. Okay, there we are. That's our shape. That's what, well, that matches the target. That's kind of what we want. And then from there, we do optimizing. So we can take out that hash before the color. The browser will correct that for us, and then play around with these values to get them smaller. So I know already that 60 pixels can be approximated to about 64Q. That's usually close enough. 110 becomes 116Q. That's also close enough. And then I'm just comparing up here to what I have. So 180, 170 pixels will become 180Q. That looks good. And then 280 pixels is 70 view width, but we can always check that with the unit golf tool. So if we go unit golf and 280 pixels, then it should give us the closest approximation. Yeah, 70 view width. So we swap that out. Already we're looking pretty short there already. Okay, that's great. We've gone a little bit off though. That's not perfect. What are we missing here? 64, 180, 70 view width. So yeah, we want this to be 116. That's better than 180. Okay. I just want to see if the body is doing anything to mess with this. No, it's not. Okay. I mean, that did give us 100%, even though it looks slightly off. Sometimes you'll see a slight diff in the diff view, but it still gets 100%. Okay, so I'm just going to go about optimizing this some more. So when you've got only one element like this, there you can sometimes take out the style rule completely and basically put everything as inline styles on the body element. And normally you wouldn't think this is faster or shorter because you still have to put a style attribute on into the HTML, into the element like that. This should give us the same thing. If I just move background over here, yeah, we have the same thing here, but this is actually this is more characters. But there's a few tricks you can do with like outdated, really old attributes on the body element that don't usually work, that aren't really supported, or maybe not supported, but not commonly used anymore. They used to be way more common, but because we don't break the web, that still just works. So instead of putting background and setting the color there, we can just use the BG color attribute. And then also instead of color, you can just use the text attribute. And these are also very forgiving. You don't need to put the hash in front of the color for it to work, which you do usually have to do if you write out background. So that can save us some characters. The next thing here, okay, let me just remove this extra semicolon. The next thing here is to get rid of these quotes, right? Which we can only do if there's no spaces in between, like no spaces at all in between any of these rules. So, I mean, one way to do that is to first try change these values. We would want to get these to percentage or different value anyway to make it shorter. So instead of 340 pixels, we can mess around with this to get us like a percentage value. So let's see, 75 is not enough. 85 works. Yeah, that's what we want. So that's shorter. And for the bottom, instead of 160 pixels, let's see, we can, yeah, 40% is better. Okay, so we already almost got rid of all of the spaces in margin. What you can do here is add a plus. It's got something to do with how like the browser engine renders white space and stuff. I don't understand exactly how this works, but you can substitute a space for a plus in some cases and it will still work. So if I were to how can I show this? Because now we won't see anything because our box shadow rule isn't working. But we can do the same thing with the pluses over here. If I just swap those all out for pluses, everything seems to work, right? If there's no spaces in the style rule, but everything still works correctly. And if you go and inspect this, you can see that everything is still working as intended. Like here's how the browser's rendering it basically, 64Q, and then it's just rendering. It's basically adding in a space for us. So +0, or just the plus symbol for the 0. So we can use that quirk basically to our advantage. Okay, there we are on 125 characters already. We only need to cut down one more, and this is a trick I can't take credit for. A friend or fellow code golfer showed me this. So on I think it's on the text, on on this color, you can drop the last value, so you basically drop the last character in the 6-digit hex code and the browser sort of auto completes it for you. Does some kind of error correcting thing to make it still work. Now that's slightly off, that's not the right color. But what you can do here, because obviously these two last values represent the amount of blue in the total color. So instead of just dropping E, that would change the value of the 9. So probably like A, all right? If you were to combine, because this is hexadecimal, so 0 to 9, and then A to F. So if we're going to combine 9 and E, like increase 9 basically, but the approximation would be A, and that's the end solution. So we have one shorter character. We've got a 5-digit hex code essentially over there. That still gives us the right color. That's it.